Hello and welcome to another episode of Navigating NIL. My name is Tyler Langford, and I'm excited to be joined by a rising star in the sport of women's lacrosse, Sofia Chepenik. Welcome, Sofia.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know it's been kind of a crazy summer for you, and obviously you've got a lot going on as an athlete, personally, and with NIL. So I kind of want to take it back to, the beginning for you. I know that you have, two older sisters who played lacrosse. I know you grew up playing the game, and it's something you're really passionate about. So mind telling us a little bit about how you got started with lacrosse and what your journey was like, early on?
So I had started lacrosse after I quit soccer. I kind of soccer's really popular in Florida, so I started when I was like 2 and was playing every single summer, every fall, and had just kind of gotten burnt out. But we're a really big sports family, so my parents were like, okay, you got to pick a sport. And at the time, I was always way too tall to be a gymnast or a dancer. And I loved watching gymnastics and dance. So if I could pick a sport, it'd probably be that at the time. But my siblings were playing games on Sundays, for their high school team. And my parents had to sign me up for this clinic called Pipeline. So I kind of just learned to pass and catch. And at the beginning, I hated lacrosse because I couldn't pass or catch or do anything. And that's pretty much the basis of the sport. So my sister had actually kind of started to tease me because some people pick up lacrosse very easily, and I was just not one of those people. But my sister was, so she was really good at it from day one. And she was kind of tease me how I wouldn't be good, sisterly love. But after she kind of made these jokes, I was no, I'm going to prove to her that I can at least pass and catch. So once I got passing and catching down, I kind of just fell in love with the sport and really haven't put a stick down since.
There you go. That's awesome. And as the oldest sibling for me, it's kind of funny hearing that because I was always that way with my brother for
Yeah.
baseball. Kind of making fun of him and whatnot. But interesting. So then you go into high school, right? And I know that you were playing on varsity when you were in grade school. So you've got kind of this pedigree, right, going into high school. And then you get there and it seems like you lived up to all the expectations, but I know your recruitment process took longer than you wanted it to. So, what was that like for you, right? Going from someone who is, I believe it was sixth grade that you were up playing varsity with your sisters, and we can talk about that as well, to someone who's kind of waiting longer than expected for the recruiting process to start. How do you handle that? How do you go about approaching, the game and the recruitment process there?
So as usually recruiting directors tell their athletes, they're okay, write down a list of schools and email them every day, or not every day, but at least 2 times a month. So I was really good about emailing these schools. And so I had a list of top 10 schools, top 20 schools. And when these schools weren't reaching out or didn't show me the interest that I had wanted, or I was second to these girls, and they're well, we're just waiting on other girls' answers. I mean, it gets really discouraging, especially because you kind of wait a bunch of your career to be able to talk to these coaches, and then once they're you're just not what we're looking for right now. I mean, it's pretty easy to get down on yourself, and I definitely got down on myself. I had gotten a couple of really good offers, but they just weren't schools that I had gotten that feeling from, and I didn't really want to just commit to a school to commit. And my year was a little bit different because of COVID. So COVID had just happened. So a lot of girls were committing to schools kind of just to have a safe backup. And I was I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to go through the decommitment process. So it was January, and actually I did go through the decommitment process because I had found a school. I fell in love with it. I committed to Oregon. Everyone was great, but then I had just kind of realized as time went on and as I was able to watch some of these other games, I just want to make sure that I didn't rush into a decision too fast. So I called the coach at Oregon and I just told her I want to open back up my process. And she was really supportive. She was well, that I totally understand because your year really didn't get to go through the official visits and you guys didn't get to come up and see these schools. So if Oregon's a place you want to be, you have a spot here, but just to, take your time, come to the camp. So that summer when I decommitted, it was really busy. I went to a camp. I think it was every single day for 2 months straight. And that's not even an exaggeration. My dad and I were up north. We were staying in hotels, staying with family. So it was a really crazy summer, but it helped a lot, getting my name out there. And a lot of these schools had finished their class of 22s. And then when I went out to Oregon, it was really far. I'm from Florida, so it's literally
Yeah.
opposites. And that coach is very, very supportive. She just said, like, I wish the best for you. Like, we're sad that we couldn't make it work, but we're excited that you get to finally like go on this process and hopefully find a school that you love. So I did. I committed to Clemson, but the recruiting process was definitely like such a hard time. And before I committed to Oregon, I remember like thinking like I don't even know if I like want to continue playing because it's like you have these goals set for yourself, and then when you don't reach them, like it was pretty easy to get down on yourself, and I definitely did. But I mean, having like support from my family and my coaches, like kind of keeping my head up, it was a lot easier to get through than just kind of trying to think about like comparing your worth to what these coaches, um, who else they're recruiting, I guess. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the recruiting world is kind of cutthroat and it's a lot more, nuanced than
Mm-hmm.
people will understand. And I was class of 21, in
Yeah.
high school. And so I wasn't coming out as an athlete, but even as a general student, I visited one school, right? And
Yeah.
that's the school I went to and I applied to a ton, but it was difficult not getting to visit. And I
Mm-hmm.
know for you guys, the scholarships were so backed up and the
Yeah.
roster spots were so backed up. And, I have a lot of friends who went through the same thing. So, you mentioned it, it's very discouraging. And obviously, having your family and coaches there to support you
Mm-hmm.
is really important. Is that kind of what brought you back to loving the game again? Or was that more something within yourself where you were like, all right, it's time to really grind and get to where I want to be?
Well, that's a great question. I think like definitely committing to Oregon, I do think helped because it kind of like had this like weight like lifted off your shoulders, so I could finally kind of like start having fun with it again. And when I went to these camps and showcases, like I didn't need to like try and prove my worth, I guess. And but I think like realizing the goals that I had set out for myself at the beginning of the process, like before September 1st, was kind of what I like looked back to and was like I told myself I want to accomplish these and like I had to put in the work to do so. And so I think there's going to be definitely ups and downs within like every career. That was definitely a down, but then I started to like go back up, especially when we got back into high school season because I had such a great team. I had such great coaches that kind of like just brought having fun back into the game. Like it wasn't ever like me competing against other girls. Now it was just like a family and like we all supported each other and we were all there for each other. And I think your team like really is your best friends. So having them around was just like reminding me like why I picked up or why I continued to play and pick up a stick every day.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it is difficult, right, to find that drive sometimes. So is that something that you found early? I know that you mentioned that you were very goal oriented, but is
Mm-hmm.
that something where you kind of you grew into that level of competitiveness and being so driven, or have you always, had that and you just kind of had to learn how to leverage it?
I definitely think I started like my work ethic and my like drive came later in my career. My brother was a state runner up in the heavyweight championship and my dad like had trained him and like they I watched him like train all the time and I was like dang like he puts in like a lot of work and at the time like I was in 6th grade and when he was a senior and watching him like go through that I was like I never said like oh I don't want to do that but I just was more like on the side of like I wasn't as into sports yet but then once I kind of realized what sports can help you accomplish and what like you can do at like the next level um I like kind of sat down with myself and I was like well do I want to accomplish any of these things and then like once I answered yes to that question it was like well what do I want to accomplish wrote down like that and then um I think for me personally I like to rise to the occasion. And I like to rise to like the level of play. So playing with like top girls in the country when I would go to like these tournaments or showcases or like tryouts, it really helped elevate my play. And I realized like there's some girls that are ahead of me, but I know what I have to do to get there. So again, like I like to make like lists of like what I need to do and how I'm gonna do it. So I really got really specific kind of with my training and my dad had trained um, a athlete in every professional sport except basketball. So he's pretty experienced. And so I was like, okay, like I want to start training. And I think my dad will like always says this, but he was too hard on my brother. But he was too easy on my sister Stella. And then for me, like he felt like he had kind of found like the right balance of like if he knows my goals, then what he needs to do to make me accomplish them is just ask me questions. So like he'll ask me questions like, does this line up with your goals? And if my answer is yes, then great. But if my answer is no, then it's like, okay, I have to take a step back and I have to look at what's really going to help me. So I feel like my drive and work ethic came a lot later in my career once I realized like I want to accomplish these things.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously having someone who's got that type of training
Yeah.
experience in your corner is never a bad
Yeah.
thing, right? So,
Hmm.
but sports are an interesting thing because, yes, it's fun and it's a game, but at the end of the day, I feel like it really is kind of a metaphor for life, right? You
Hmm.
learn a lot of lessons in sports and in athletics that, translate to whether it's just being a college student, right? And how you interact with people on a
Hmm.
daily basis or what you value and how you approach various things in life. Has that been the experience that you've found?
Yes. So I was a captain 3 years, so sophomore, junior, and senior year in high school. And my sophomore year, like I did not know how to lead. I was just really didn't. It was hard to lead girls that were older than you too, like being in this like authoritative position, and then you're like trying to tell seniors almost like what to
Yep.
do. It's a little intimidating as a sophomore. So I didn't really know how to lead, and then just the Last Dance had came out like the senior my no no the summer going into my junior year, and with like Michael Jordan and like his experience with the Bulls and his leadership, and I had watched it. And so my junior year when I was named captain, like I was way too like tough on the girls. Like my dad was like, okay, like, and my coaches were like, okay, you got to take it back, like they're not responding well. And then my senior year I had like kind of found like the right balance of like you really, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is like everyone responds different to leadership, and like everyone's going to respond different to like they have different learning styles and they have different approaches, and to get I guess what you want out of someone, you have to really figure them out. And so I mean I took time to kind of get to know the girls on my high school team and like make sure that if I was telling them to do something, it was in a way that I know is constructive for them and that was actually going to kind of get through to them. Because if there's some girls that just like it straightforward and like blunt. And so for those girls, like I would just be straightforward and blunt. But for some girls, like they like to have like examples and they like to like be really built up and then you can tell them something. So I think kind of navigating like there's so many different types of people, and like realizing if you want to be a leader, like you have to really get to know people to help like move them forward and push them.
No, totally. And I mean, again, it is that way in life, right? You have to approach different
Mm-hmm.
people in different ways because, like you said, they're going to respond differently.
Yeah.
So whether it's, having to really lead and kind of, really manage someone or kind of just give them direction and let them go,
Mm-hmm.
it is an interesting challenge. So then going from 3 years as a captain in high school, right? And you've got the pedigree of someone who's been playing on varsity for a long time to being a freshman in a maiden program, right, at
Mm-hmm.
Clemson. What was it like for you trying to, apply those leadership skills now to a new program as a freshman? Was that a challenge for you?
I mean, I kind of think it was definitely a challenge, especially because we were a team, like we were really fifth year heavy. So a bunch of these girls came from different schools. So there were so many different personality types and different like leadership skills. And so like a lot of them complemented each other. And I think like the way that I tried to lead was just like mostly by example and like being positive, because I mean my personality type, like I'm pretty outgoing and like I like to like have fun, make jokes. So like trying to build people up, especially when you could see like the morale was down, like I felt like that was my role this season. And really just like cheering people on and like cheering people up if I could tell that something was wrong. And then I think also just being like a good teammate, like checking in on people, um, making friends, like giving them a hug when it's needed. And I think we had such great leaders this year. Our captains, Marina and Mallory, were awesome. And like they led very differently, but their like leadership style definitely complemented each other. So I think like having so many different personalities and coming into a team that hadn't been established yet, uh, like people just took on different leadership roles, but it all worked out like really well. So
Yeah, absolutely. And the mix of personalities is always going to be interesting,
Mhm.
but I think, for you to have the emotional intelligence to be able to, say, all right, what's my role here? Is it lead by example? Is it be
Mhm.
positive? Or is it, is it the way you approached it your junior year of high school, right? Kind of having to go through that journey and
Mhm.
then evaluate what the best way to approach it is an interesting process, but it's one that clearly has worked out for you. So you spent your freshman year at Clemson, and we don't need to get into too many specifics, but I know the transfer portal is a big part of college athletics now. So what has your experience been like in the transfer portal?
Well, my experience in the transfer portal has honestly been really good. I'm going to I'm taking a trip from I think it's like May 29th to June 4th. And I told like every coach that I've been talking to, like I don't want to make a decision until I come back. So it's kind of like good to get that out there so I don't have to like feel rushed into making a decision. And also like how I entered the transfer portal was pretty sudden. And so like I mean it's still pretty emotional. Like when I went back up to Clemson to get my stuff and like I was like crying when I was like in Clemson because I mean I had such a great place and such great team, coaches, and so it's been like emotional, but also having people reach out to me that like were once my dream schools has kind of been like a full circle moment. Like it's like wow, like the the coaches that had gone another direction or that I was unable to speak to, like now I'm get to speak to. It's just like such a blessing, and I think it's really like exciting. Um, and I mean, there's definitely different days where it's like, well, dang, like I'm leaving, but then there's other days where I'm like, I'm really excited for the new journey. And I'm really excited to find a place that I know I'm gonna love and obviously gonna be there for the next 3 years. So I'm excited, and I think it is a really good tool for some girls in different situations too to explore other options. So it's exciting.
No, it is. And it's one of those things where I think people see big headlines regarding the transfer portal and they don't understand what it is on a
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day basis,
Yeah.
right? I mean, at the end of the day, from my perspective at least, having spoken to you previously, it's like, first of all, half of the Eccker 10 we talked about was how great Clemson is,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, Clemson's a great place, and
Mm-hmm.
I think college is a lot about what you can get out of a place, but also what you can give to a place.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you got a lot out of Clemson, right? But I think also you went in there and it's not like you didn't give them a lot too,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there can be a happy ending that ends in the
Yeah.
transfer portal and there's nothing wrong with that. So, props to you for handling it in a way where it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's all good. And like you said, for a fifth year heavy team, I'm sure you're losing a lot of people that, you had known your freshman year,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got a lot of great opportunities out there on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So are you approaching the recruiting process differently this time, now knowing kind of what you want and don't want, or is it similar for you as it was, coming out of high school?
I think like I've definitely narrowed my choices down, and I think just this time, I mean, even last time I was really candid, but this time it's like I really do know what I want because now I've been in a year of college and I've had that year of experience under my belt. So it's like if a school reach out to me that's amazing in lacrosse, but I just know like that's not going to fit who I am personally, then it's I'm pretty good at kind of just like telling them like I really really appreciate the opportunity, but I think I'm just headed in a different direction, and if anything changes, then I'll let you know. But this time, I'm really like in the recruiting process last time, like especially before, like I was emailing coaches like all the time, and this time it's been a lot easier because I've just kind of been in contact with them, like over phone calls and things like that. So, and it's funny because I usually don't answer like calls if I don't know the number, but like now I'm like, okay, wait, like this might be like it's like different area codes. I'm like, okay, wait, I actually have to answer now because I don't know who's calling, but um it's it's different this time, especially because I've had kind of to like the recognition from Clemson, um, and have made some accolades that have positioned me better now that I've entered the portal. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're an athlete in college, it is, you know, you kind of want to be taking
Hmm.
things into your own hands and doing what's best for you because, at the end of the day, it's your career,
Yeah.
right? So for you, I guess your thought process was that Was that something where you were like, this is just something that I need to do for my career? This is just what's best for my lacrosse, my lacrosse career?
I think I'm trying. I think like entering the portal. Okay, look, if I would have stayed at Clemson, I think it would have been really good for my lacrosse career. But to entering the portal, I think it's gonna also be just as good for my lacrosse career. Um, and now it's funny because I think back and I'm like, if I would have picked a different school, like how different of a path of life I would be on. And so like kind of think like tying it into now, it's thinking like if I were to stay at Clemson, like how different of a path it would have been or it will be. So I think to answer your question, I think both would have benefited very well, but for me personally and like for personal reasons, I just felt like for my like mental that it would just be best for me to enter the portal and there's no like bad blood or anything. Um like I still like love the coaches and I love the people but I just think it's best for me to like go on a different path. So,
Totally. And it's good. I mean, in life, you want to prioritize doing what's best for
mhm.
you. And so, one thing I do always want to talk about, if we can, is, and only to the point you're
Mhm.
comfortable with, but the intersection of mental health and sports, right?
Mhm.
Because, at the end of the day, yeah, you're an athlete, but you are also a human being, right?
Mhm.
So, there's a lot that goes into your days that isn't just lacrosse,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you're in college, you're in a new environment. Was it more difficult for you to manage mental health and just overall, I guess, life in general as an athlete in college compared to high school? Or was that something you were kind of prepared for immediately?
So I'm the type of person, I think I was prepared for it like pretty immediately. Like I'm the type of person like that kind of tries to look at the positives and everything. And if I don't, then my parents help me trying to look at the positive in things. So when I had first gotten there, like everything was great. Like I had found such a good group of friends. Like practices were fun, and like I said earlier, I trained with my dad over the summer. So going into school, I was prepared very well for like lifts and conditioning and things like that. So that never really ever got me down. I think it's difficult when like you're in practice and if you mess up and then like you continue to mess up and it's just like one of those days where you're like I literally can't do anything right and it's really easy to get down on yourself. But then you also have to remember like I'm gonna have off days and like if you don't have an off day
Right.
then like you're not doing something right. Like so
Right.
it's like you need to have off days. Um and so I think too, like the resources at Clemson were like amazing. Like if if I ever was feeling like really down for maybe like a couple weeks, like they had people there that I could talk to if I wanted to, and like they had people at our like convenience to kind of navigate through mental health. And then too, like I know basically the fifth years were like our older sisters, and like the older girls were like our older sisters, and they would check in on us, and they know that it's a difficult transition from high school to college. So kind of having them like as older sisters, and you have your family that you can talk to, but kind of talking to someone too that's going through it. Like I would always talk to like my friend if I was like my best friend's Tanner, and if she like I could tell she was having an off day, or if she could tell that I was having an off day, like we would just always kind of talk about it and then like joke about it for 5 minutes, and then it's like okay, well tomorrow's a new day, like it'll be fine. So I think overall, just being able to talk about what you're feeling definitely helps kind of get some of like the emotions out, like whether that's like anger or sadness. Um, it can help like bring up like I came here because I love the sport. Like you have to remember your why and like your passion for the sport, and not always get so hard on yourself if something's not going your way, and like trying to figure out what you can do if like you're not playing as well. Like maybe it's like go hit like for lacrosse, like go hit the wall for 10 minutes and just like get your mind right. But having people there to support you and love you is definitely something that was such like a bonus about Clemson. So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you've got the right mindset, right? You have to kind of treat every day as a new day because
Mm-hmm.
it, like, if you kind of get, especially in sports, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, from a baseball player's perspective, you get stuck up on the last strikeout you had, like
Mhm.
every time you strike out or every time you throw a bad pitch or make an error, you're not going to be playing baseball for very long,
Yeah.
right? So that's a good perspective. And then I kind of want to transition a little bit and talk about women's sports,
Mhm.
right? So we are an NIL company ultimately, and you have obviously killed it in the NIL space. And one thing we've seen in NIL as a trend is that women do really well,
Mhm.
right? Because you guys have a better understanding of how to market yourselves and represent
Mhm.
yourselves on social media. And I mean, it's a fact,
Mhm.
right? So and lacrosse is also the fastest growing sport in the country,
Yeah.
right? So what's it like for you then being at the intersection of you're in the fastest growing sport in the country, right? You're at the college D1 level winning awards, and you've also got NIL,
Mhm.
which you've clearly leveraged well. Was that, I mean, how do you approach that? That seems to me like a ton to kind of come on as a freshman and just do.
Um, well, as I kind of said in our first call, but I actually, it sounds so weird like saying this and every single time I say it. I yes, he's my agent, but he's also just such like a great person and mentor that has been there for me. But he had like before I went to Clemson, I had like one NIL deal with like this company called Podium X. And you have to like run it through compliance and you have to get like the um everything like checked off, make sure it's legit and all that type of stuff. But I had gotten sick over the fall, so was out, so like wasn't really like checking like anything. But he had DM'd me like my like prime sickness and I never saw it. So I actually like DM'd him like 2 months later. But he basically was like asked to get on a call and like told me who he was and what he did. So we got on a call and he's been awesome. Like he's helped me with so many deals and kind of helping me navigate through the NIL because again, it is it's such like a popular thing right now, and especially for women in sports. Like, I mean, Angel Reese, I think, also said it best. Like, she was like, someone had asked her, "Why didn't you declare for the draft for the women's NBA this year?" And she was like, "Well, honestly, like right now, I'm more profitable as a college athlete because of NIL than I will be in the women's NBA right now." And women's sports are on the upcoming, but they just haven't gotten to that point yet where like she's making more money through NIL than she would just being like a player. Um, so it's one that's really exciting to see like how much like women's basketball is like benefiting off of NIL, and then I think lacrosse is just like starting to get up there with it. I think it's really exciting to have people come to your games and like I've never heard someone say like, "Oh, that wasn't so much fun to watch." And so usually when people get invested into lacrosse, they're obsessed with it, and that's why I think it's the fastest growing sport. But with NIL, like those kind of both line up with each other, and I think a lot of companies are gonna kind of start to see like the value in women's lacrosse and see how exciting it is, and then like want to get behind players. And so I think just kind of utilizing that to like your best advantage. And there's been like companies that have reached out to me, like protein companies or like supplement companies, but like at the end of the day, they don't really line up with what I am for, or like if I'm really not gonna take the supplement or I'm not gonna actually eat the protein, like why am I gonna
Right.
sponsor it? So I think like staying true to yourself will benefit you in the long run because I think like what you put out there is what you're gonna get back, and if you really do stay true to who you are, you're gonna like I think like the universe like will repay you. So
No, 100%. And I love Christian. Like
yeah.
Christian's the man. He came on the podcast, did an awesome job, and he and I like we keep up and text a little bit.
Mhm.
And he's funny because he's a really quality guy, but
Mhm.
you can also tell he's really good at what he does. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed speaking to him because he made the point to me that you know, he could have gone to a big agency, right? And
Mhm.
there you could easily sign with a big
Mhm.
agency, but there's a benefit in that personal level of,
Yeah.
trust and that type of relationship that you have and where he's checking on you and your friends and your family and he's like it's more than just an agent client relationship. So I guess for you to have that is such a big advantage, but you also have to do things, the right way. So, in terms of building your brand and approaching, companies and the types of companies that you want to partner with, did you sit down with him and kind of just figure out what you value and who you want to partner with, or how did you kind of set out on your NIL, journey?
It was like our first call, and I think one he like had asked my goals just in lacrosse, so like without NIL or anything. And then he kind of asked like what I wanted to stand for and like companies that I would want to align myself with. And my answer was women's empowerment. Like I really want to empower the next generation of women, whether they're athletes or not, but just to see like be a strong, hopefully a strong, influential woman in someone's life, like can make like a huge difference. So we had made that point, and then he had kind of when a company comes along that is maybe like in question or like wants to like partner with me, like we'll always do research on them and like make sure that their values kind of align with mine or what they're selling like I do actually like or like want to use. So I think overall we kind of established who I am as a person, what I stand for, and like what I'm passionate about. And then kind of just when other companies come along, like sometimes he'll just know like that's not something that that's not someone I want to partner with. So like I mean he'll say it, but I'm just like he's like I didn't think you would.
Yeah, you can filter
Yeah.
those out.
So um as we've kind of grown in our relationship too, like he knows me and my family and he knows kind of what I want and it's really was just that main call that we kind of established what I'm going to stand for. So,
That's great.
mm-hmm,
That's awesome. That's a really valuable relationship to have. And
mm-hmm,
again, I mean, it's, you're both clearly great people with good values. So it's a solid pairing. Yeah, and I think you also mentioned a really good point in terms of the revenue that's getting generated for women in college sports,
mm-hmm,
right? I mean, there's always been kind of that gap at that professional level,
mm-hmm,
whether it be soccer, basketball, whatever it is, where for whatever reason the revenue's not there. And so seeing the women's tournament this year generate more NIL money than the men's tournament was interesting, right?
mm-hmm,
You had a ton of awesome storylines with Caitlin Clark. You've
mm-hmm.
got LSU, right? You've got all these just super, super talented girls who
Yeah.
are killing it. So, um, I guess for you to then, lead that kind of first generation of NIL, female athletes, what's that like for you? What are some challenges there? What are some difficulties that you've, dealt with as you started, taking that journey?
Um, I think like there's been like so many positives because I've had like such a great support system, but I mean, there's a lot of things to just like navigate through like contracts. Like if a contract isn't aligning with like for example, a lot of them had to go through compliance or no, all of them
Hmm.
have to go through compliance. So when they get them, like if they find something that they don't like, then they can like send it back. So I think the most difficult thing was just like trying to find kind of that balance. Like if you thought like that something was right in there, but then they thought something was wrong, uh, like navigating like the in between and like trying to find that perfect balance. And like luckily like Christian kind of dealt with all that, but like we would talk about it. But there honestly hasn't been too many difficulties because I feel like Christian has just been like so amazing and like helping support me and kind of best setting me up to succeed and not really like have to fail. So it's been awesome.
Yeah. And then final question before I put you, into a little bit of a 5 question gauntlet that we do at the end of every episode. But I'm curious if NIL is something not from a school perspective, but from what you can and can't do in certain states. Does that impact your recruiting decision at all? Your ability to do NIL at a certain level? Because obviously the state laws differ, so you have
Mm-hmm.
different freedoms in different
Yeah.
places. I'm just curious if that impacts your decision at all.
Well, actually, like I'm like down to really two schools, and it hasn't really impacted where I'm gonna choose because at the end of the day, like I've had goals before I knew what I could accomplish through NIL. So I mean, NIL is a great perk of college athletics, but then I also know like I have these goals that I've set out for myself that I want to accomplish, and I'd rather accomplish them than make couple of bucks on the side. So it's not impacting my decision. Because I think too like wherever I go, there'll be NIL benefits, but uh, at the end of the day, like I have goals that I want to accomplish, and I'd rather accomplish them. So
Good. That's
yeah.
awesome. One of our guys who came on, Reed, from athletes to athletes. He went to Texas Tech for baseball because it
Mm-hmm.
was his biggest offer, and all this stuff. And I've talked about him in a few pods actually, but he ended up, graduating as a normal a normal student from Texas, right? Because he talked about how, you get caught up in a lot of things when you're getting recruited. And if you kind of stray away from what's best for you as a person and what you value and where you feel comfortable, and you talked about it in our Eccker 10 interview, that gut feeling that you get on campus,
Yeah.
right? If you stray away from that and kind of prioritize the wrong things, then you might not end up in a place that's good for you or for that
Yeah.
place.
Mm-hmm. Completely agreed.
Perfect. Yeah, well, you've done an awesome
Uh,
job, but before I let you go, I've
uh,
got 5 quick questions
uh,
that I'm going to have to run you through.
uh,
So the first one, I got to know what your funniest, most embarrassing sports moment that you can think of is.
oh gosh. Well, at least this year is sometimes the ball and your stick gets stuck at like the top. So like when you go to shoot, if like it's not in your pocket, then it'll just like fly out. So I went to like go shoot one time and the ball like completely flew out and I just remember like it soared like over to like the stands and it was just I was like, oh gosh, because a lot of people in South Carolina also don't know lacrosse. So I'm like, no one knows that like it like fell out of my stick. So I'm just like, I'm sitting back there and there's always a meme in lacrosse where like if you like punch in your stick, like people like blame it on the stick. So I was like trying to like blame it on the stick, but it was so bad. So
That's hilarious. Everyone on the field knew what was
yeah,
going on, but everyone in the
yeah.
stands was like, "Man,
I
that
know.
is a
You like heard the sound
that's a
effects.
miss."
They were like, oh,
Yeah,
and I was
right.
like,
Exactly. It was like, "Oh."
yeah, no, literally. So,
I know your dad's a trainer,
mhm.
so maybe don't show him this part of the episode. But if you're gonna have a major cheat meal one day, what are you rocking with?
Oh my gosh. I used to go to the Loop like every single day. It's this place in Jacksonville. I think it's a chain. I would get chicken fingers and fries, an Oreo milkshake, and then like extra fries. So definitely that meal. It was so good. So
That sounds ridiculous, and I might need to replicate something like that later today. If you had to choose one superpower for the rest of your life, what are you choosing?
I would say mind read, but I think I would get like I think that would be like dangerous. But maybe to be invisible.
That's a good
Yeah.
one. That's what someone said on the last
Yeah.
one, and I hadn't heard that one yet, and I like
Yeah.
that. I see the mind reading's one tough,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like it's good until you can read everyone's mind, and then I'm like, I don't know if I
Yeah,
need to
exactly.
be privy to all that information.
Exactly.
All right, let's say you're on a deserted island and you got to survive for a year. What 3 things are you bringing with you?
Ooh. Like basic necessities or like
It's up
okay.
to you. Some people bring their families, some people bring like hunting tools. I've gotten a wide range of answers.
Well, I guess if I can bring my family, then actually no, we might drive each other insane. But yeah, probably my family, water,
Yep.
and then probably like I don't know, like hunting gear, so I can like get some food. Animals.
I feel like
Yeah,
that's valid. I
yeah,
feel like that's
yeah.
solid. You got everything you
Hmm.
need. And then finally, who is the greatest athlete that you've ever gotten to play against or with?
With okay, let's.
Either way.
That's a great question. I think like um one of okay, so growing up like playing watching lacrosse, like you see all these girls and then like I finally got to play against them this year. But someone that like I've always wanted to play against and like watch growing up was Belle Smith and I just think she's like amazing. She plays for Boston College, but she's a midi, but she's awesome. So
Very
mhm.
cool. That's fantastic. Well, you've done an awesome job, and I really appreciate you taking some time out of your very busy schedule to do this.
Thank you so
So
much for
thanks
having
again.
me. It was awesome.